Good afternoon, dear friends, and welcome to this um, other or another live stream of the Spirit Society of Baltimore here together on this amazing afternoon of fall. For some of us, getting a little bit chilly. The weather now is kind of changing little by little, but we send our warmth of our hearts to you. Being here together with you, it's always an amazing moment to all of us. We would like to conduct this Saturday by starting with a reading of the book Happy Life and then praying as usual so we can pass the word to Daniel Santos, our speaker of this afternoon into this evening. We chose the following message, opening randomly. Uh, we says, injuries to the soul are more mortifying. Outer wounds heal easily, while those that swarm within us take longer. Bathe in the waters of confidence in God, of patience, of humility, of forgiveness, and of love. Do not let hate, selfishness, rebellion, or pain mortify the tissues of your soul. Many illnesses of the body originate in a spirit damaged by emotional conflicts or by the acid of moral imperfections. Look after your internal equipment, keeping it free of stubborn aggression, vices, and irresponsibility. A beautiful message from Joanna de Angelis that we dedicate to one another, to those who are here with us, as well as our family members, our friends, and all of those who will be watching this in the future as well. Before, as we said, we pass the word to Daniel. Let us pray together. This is the moment where we invite everyone to close your eyes if you wish, to find yourself in this moment, not only spiritually but also physically, or physically but also spiritually, both ways, so that we are really paying attention to this moment and allowing this vibration to come into our rooms of our homes and permeate throughout our homes and our neighborhoods as well. When we say, Dear Mother, Father God, guide us during this moment where we come together once more to pray and to connect with one another, to alleviate our hearts of the burdens of our day to day lives, to alleviate our struggles, to communicate with one another, not through words, not through our difficulties, not through exaggerated movements of the physical body, but the vibrational love that we send to one another right now. The need that we have to have this communion with you, dear Lord, through the presence of our brothers and sisters who are watching us, who are following us, and connected with one heart and one mind. It is then with our hearts full of joy that we send our vibrations to our brothers and sisters who could not be with us, who may not be in the same level as we are of trying to understanding ourselves, seeking peace and kindness towards one another. Let us send to them those who are suffering, those who are going through difficult moments right now, our good vibrations. May your love guide each one of us. And may our speaker of this evening be a good vessel of light to bring us reminders, new teachings, so that we can conduct our lives more effectively and more efficiently. This way, we thank you for the opportunity of having one another, first of all, having this opportunity, and to be able to project ourselves into a better future. And so be it. So, this afternoon into this evening, we have Daniel Santos talking about understanding fear. Who is not fearful, right? It's not the fear of that we remember, growing up, scared of this, scared of that, the phantoms that our parents, bestowed upon us, but other fears that we carry with us that can actually damage. not only our spirituality, but also sometimes our physical bodies. But I'll leave it up to Daniel to go ahead and expand in this amazing topic. And I thank you, Daniel, for your time. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you. As you said, yes. Let me just, yeah. So, welcome everyone again. Thank you, Leo, for the introduction. And as you have said, this is kind of like a reminders, right? This highlight about this basic emotion that we call fear that we all have, right? This is something that um, all organic lives in this planet has some degree of fear because it's rooted in our evolution, and because of that we experience. So, but our idea today, as the talk says, understanding fear, so it's just for us to give you a little highlight and a reminder about what's the mechanism that our body process fears and how can we cope with these fears. Because if you're asking the question over there what to do to not have fear, so we don't have the answer, because this is a basic emotion we all have in this planet at some level. Of course, the idea here is for us to revisit some of those mechanisms and and do a self-evaluation and try to regain control of our fears. Because sometimes if we don't have the we don't know how to manage this emotion, as any other emotion, especially basic emotions that we have learned, such as fear, anger, sadness. So we're not going to be able to move on in life, right? And so we have fears that is considered very, I would say, clinical damage to our evolution or to our life. But we have some subliminal fears that if we don't pay attention, that can become something chronic as we neglect those fears. So the idea here is so to take advantage of what we have learned about how fear is processed from the science point of view, but also to bring some of the spiritist approach, um, how to deal with fear, right? So let us bring our slide here. So I would like to start with the base, with the definition, right? Although you may know the definition of fear, but just to make sure that we are going to be in the same page, fear is this unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or a threat. Whether the threat is real or imagined, the feeling or condition of being afraid is the feeling or condition to be afraid. So, I mean, if we look for the definition of fear, so basically it is this emotion, it's a basic emotion, it's enrooted in our evolution. All from animals, even like plants, they have rudimental type of fear. And why is that? It's because we need to survive, right? In order for us to survive, we have to have building in our structure a mechanism that will make us to not destroy ourselves, right? So, and this basic emotion is fear. But sometimes this can really take over of our life and we become paralyzed, right? We cannot even move on. So the other way that we can define fear is from the scientific perspective view, right? So, for example, fear is a chain of reaction in the brain that start with a stressful stimulus and ends with the release of chemicals that cause a racing heart, fast breathing, and energized muscles, among other things, also known as the fight or flight response. For those that has took biology class, those is a base teaching that we learn, right? So when we are faced adversity, when we are in a situation that we need to make decision, and depends of the kind of external stimulus, we may either prepare ourselves to fight or to run away, right? And all this happen because there is a internal mechanism that our body does. So this is pure like nature, is biology, but uh, and is sometimes those responses is even done without our conscience. Is like, is very fast when fear comes in high level. So when we talk about fear here, we need to take in consideration that fear has also an intensity, right? So we have those little fears that, you know we can manage, we can control, but we have, a very intense um, degree of fear. For example, if you're walking the street and suddenly you see a snake, I bet you're gonna really like have that peak of fear, right? Or if you are like traveling by airplane and suddenly, the airplane starts to shake, our mechanism of defense of survival will kick in, and that is done even if you don't want it to, right? So all this chemical reaction will happen in our body, and we're gonna spend some time looking how the brain is wired in a way to process those experiences. So Joanna D'Angeli, that is our spiritist benefactor, the mentor of our dear Divaldo Franco, the Brazilian spiritist medium. She says fear would be an inheritance of the unconscious guilt, deep rooted in our unconsciousness. So basically, she's saying that fear also can be some is the cause of some fears, also can be bring from the deep of our conscience that was somehow created at some point in our life. Consider that we have had many lifetimes, so that we can bring from also from past life, right? And a lot of traumas, a lot of fears, anxiety, even disease that we have, mental disease, can have the root in past life if we cannot find the cause in this lifetime. So, to start our conversation about this emotion, fear, we just would like to set, the basis here about the definition of fear, about how science describe fear, and what in Spiritism, and we pick Joanna De Angelis as she's a teacher, I would say, in the Spiritist philosophy that bring this concept of how to deal with our emotion. And she's right, because we are this collective of persona from past life, right? And what we are today is a um, a, a group of experience, events, and personality and behave that we have be built, from different experience in other lives, right? So, um, but then we can ask the question, so what is what we fear the most? So I did some research, and this university, Chapman University, in California, they have a division, the division of study of American fears. So they every year, this university, this division, they do a research. It is they have been doing this for many years. So every year they release a new survey, and that's a way to measure how, the American people is feeling regards to what they fear the most, right? So I didn't go too much back in time, but I went 7 years ago, when October, exactly 7 years ago, October 2014, when they asked what, you know, what is the most fearful thing that the American people has. So this research is just here in the US. Of course, if we're gonna do this in other country, maybe the answer would be a little bit different. But so as you can see here, you know, America who say they fear. First one, public speaking. So now you guys can have an idea, although we are doing virtually this presentation, how I feel right now, right? So public speaking, it was the number one um, uh, emotion or experience that people had in terms of be afraid to do, right? To be fearful. Public speaking. Of course, there is one fear that is rooting our evolution that is not here because we all have in our level is the fear of death. Is the number one, right? The fear of death. So because of our survival mode, of course, the survival mode is important for us to keep living. So the opposite is death, right? The death of the physical body. So that's the number one. But the second after that would be public speaking. This was 7 years ago. And then heights, bug, and snake. We can see that public speaking was 25% of the people that was interviewed. And drowning, blood needles, né? Claustrophobia, flying, strangers, zombies. I think because of, you know, the Netflix series, probably. Darkness, clowns, ghost, and so on. So this is the basically data that they collected 7 years ago. So now the question is, what about right now, Daniel, 2020, 2021? Because we have been experiencing a different times now, right? So, and then you can go to their website and collect the information if you want, because I collect only 10, the top 10, but they have like 100, I think 95 different type of fears that people experience. The number one right now, and this research was done the beginning of 2021, so they assume that 2021. So corrupt government officials. This represent 80% of what people right now is fearful. The second one, people that we love die. 2 years ago was the number 5, so now it represents almost 60%. The third one, a loved one contracting the coronavirus, also almost 6%. Oops, number 4, people I love become seriously ill. So this was number 3 in 2 years ago. Now is number 4 and represent 57.2%. Widespread civil unrest, 56. A pandemic or major epidemic, 55%. Economic or financial collapse, 54%. Sorry about that. Okay. Cyber terrorism was number 7 2 years ago. Now is number 8, 51%. Pollution of ocean, rivers, and lake was number 2 years ago. Now is number 9. 50% of the interview rated as something that they are fearful. And top 10, biological warfare, 49.3%. So of course there is more. You know, there is a list of 100 top fears that people report that they have, right? So I guess you are may asking yourself over there, which kind, what you fear the most. Maybe it's one of these that is in the top 10 here that we just presented. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's others that I didn't show here. But if you can go to the website www.chapman.edu. So this is the website of the university, that university, and you can download the list of the 95 types of fear that right now this country here is experienced for, right? So that's just to give to us an idea the situation that we are living. Of course, we are under a pandemic situation right now. So it's expect that this is the one that bring people's fear the most, right? But I have to say that the number one caught my attention because 7 years ago, that number one that we experienced here about corruption was not even in the top 10 of um, the survey that was done 7 years ago. So that shows to us that fear also can change depends of the time or period we are living, right? Probably if we go back 100 years ago, um, you know, they would experience all type of fears that even is not here, probably because, the degree of understanding that we have about that particular situation, right? Um, but let us go back now a little bit and touch a little bit about the neurobiology of fear, or what we have learned with the advancement of science regards to fear. So, one of important part of the brain that we learn is called the limbic system. This system is responsible pretty much to, make us alive, to survive, right? So in this system, they have like four major structure in this system that we call the limbic system. That there is other structure here, but we just point the four main one. That is the hypothalamus, the thalamus, the amygdala, the hippocampus. As you can see, the amygdala is the one that process emotion. The hippocampus is responsible for memory conservation, especially like what we call short-term memory and long-term memory. So, for example, if someone give a telephone number and you are able to memorize that number, if you the hippocampus is the one that processes that information, and if it is something that is connected to emotion, maybe it's going to be sent to um, the external part of the brain, that's the cortex, where those information will be stored permanently. But a lot of the information that we have during the day, we just is short term, right? So if I ask you, what did you, for example, was your dinner last week on Saturday last week? Probably you're not going to remember because the brain decide to say that's not important, right? So, another structure that is very important is the thalamus. It works as a relay information, which means that everything that comes from our senses go first through the thalamus, and then the thalamus will send that to the specific area of the brain. The thalamus is like a conductor, okay? If orchestra, for example, is the one that dictate where information is going to go to our brain. Hypothalamus is responsible for the homeostasis, which means that the release of enzyme hormone in our brain. So it's controlled by this structure. And finally, the amygdala. That's the one that we're gonna give you a very good attention to this structure. It's a very small structure. It's called amygdala because resemble a almond shape, something like that. And we have two because this is like a cross section of the brain. So we have two hemispheres. So we we just see one here. It's very small. It's this structure here. So it's probably in the middle of our brain. So why are we talking about the limbic system? So we wanted to understand how fear is processed, right? So this is basic neurobiology. Okay, so um, I'm not going to go to the detail because I think it's not the purpose of this conversation that we are having here. But I just wanted you to understand how our brain process um, a fearful stimulus. So the limbic system is responsible pretty much for our behavior and emotional response. Okay. Also is responsible for detection of a threat. That's related to what we are discussing here today. Also is an area that triggers the fight or flight response. and also process information that's related to fear conditioning. So basically, it's memory events that is happened by association, trauma, for example. A great example of this is the Pavlov experiment that, when they present food and ring the bell, and the dog salivates after doing this, couple times, they don't present the food, they just ring the bell, and then the dog salivates. So this is the way that scientists have find out and came to the conclusion that that we have, we can have this type of memory by association. And sometimes, for example, one of the experiment in research that that they perform that's very that we learn when we're in school is like, for example, if you have a rat and you put a cat, and so in fact the cat is not there, but you put just the audio of a cat, like very loud out from a cat. So, and then they measured all what happened with the rat. So the rat became very stressful. We know that there is no cat over there; it's just the out. So it's by association. We trigger those emotions that, if we are not in control of that, this really can paralyze us and it cause a damage regards to our life, that today life, right? So, but the other thing that the limbic system does, they process positive emotion. The research have the scientists has already described, and this is well accepted nowadays. That the limbic system also can process positive stimulus. So, all, for example, when we talk about motivation, when we talk about, yes, I'm gonna work to accomplish this or that, the motivation is processed by this area. As fear and all the behavior and emotion also is processed by this area of the brain. Okay, so talking about this fight or flight response. So just to give you a little bit an idea how the brain processes those information. For example, if you have a threat, and this threat can be anything, can be a snake, or but can be a very stressful conversation that we may experience with a coworker or a family member. Can be something in the street that are strange, or a kind of like, you see someone with the gun in their hands. This presents a threat. So what happened that moment? So we need to survive, right? So we have a threat. So the first structure that's going to be activated in that moment would be the amygdala, because the amygdala is the part of the brain that is en route throughout our evolution to save us from a threat or to make us be alive, right? So is a defense mechanism, is a very high refined defense mechanism that we have. And you may ask, Daniel, how do you know that's the amygdala? Well, we don't have time, but there is scientific experiment that was done in the past. They went that they do a lesion, they destroy the amygdala in animals, and then they observe that that animal was not fearful. Another thing that we can observe, that if we just not destroy, for example, people that drink alcohol, the mechanism of some drugs, uh, they not destroy the amygdala, but they can mimic what the amygdala does. So they decrease that feeling of be exposed, and people become more talkative. Their degree of fear decrease, but that is when people is under influence of any other chemical as well. So the amygdala will be activated. So then what comes next? So depends of the threat, the intensity of the threat. Sometime, for example, is a snake. So we have to recognize the threat. So the information is sent almost instantaneous to our cortex, that's another structure of our brain. to process and to define what the threat is. Okay, so that's very important. So and then the cortex is a threat. So what's come next? So now the amygdala is gonna activate or access the hippocampus. So remember, the hippocampus is responsible for to keep our homeostasis. Means that we need to be in all our physiology, the way it works, need to be in balance, right? So, but now the amygdala is just telling to the hippocampus, to the hypothalamus, hey, we have a situation here. We have a situation here. So we need to now give priority to some of our part of the body. So the hypothalamus is the one that is responsible to access the pituitary gland. That's a gland that's in the middle of our brain. And the pituitary gland will access the sympathetic nervous system, and this is part of the autonomic nervous system. So it's a mechanism that we have in our central nervous system that work in the is independent of our will, right? So is biology, is pure biology, and is doesn't is not controlled by our thought. Basically, for example, our heart is beating, our intestine is working, completely independent of if you don't want them to work or not, right? So you cannot tell, okay, stop to beat, the heart to beat. It's going to continue because it's under the control of the autonomic nervous system. And finally, this autonomic nervous system will um, um, access or recruit or stimulate the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands is two glands that we have in the top of our kidneys. And what the adrenal glands going to do, they're going to release some chemicals in our bloodstream. And this is the three most important one. Adrenaline or epinephrine is another name for adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. So this three, there is other thing that is going to be released in our body, but this is the main one. This is the one that will, the adrenaline will prepare you to either you fight or you run, fight or flight, right? And your muscle become ready to confront the situation, or um, in the animal kingdom, some animals they will freeze because that's a defense mechanism, right? And sometimes we do that in our life. So, and finally, the physiological response. So this is pretty much just to give you a summary how fear is processed in our um, physical body, and and this pretty much happens to us every day. Depends of the intensity of the threat that we have, the harmful stimulus. Um, so sometimes this stimulus is very mild, and we, pretty much have, this happen in a very small quantity in our body. But one of the things that we need to really to be aware is that if this has become a habit, we get like um, stressed. I mean, stressed, anxiety, fear is three different things. Okay, so anxiety is another emotion that we have because now we start to um, kind of leave something that didn't happen, right? So we are with our mind. So, for example, a great example of this. So if you're gonna have a meeting in your work Monday, for example, today's Saturday, and is a meeting that you're going to give a presentation, for example, or a meeting that you're going to be evaluated. You're going to have some degree of fear. Initially, the emotion is fear. The fear of not doing well, the fear that you may mess up, the fear that you'll not feel good to do that presentation. Um, but then sometime what happen when we have fear, we also recruit other emotions to partake in that feeling. that we are having. And one of the emotion that is very common is always accompanied with fear is anxiety, right? Because now we start to leave the situation that is in the future. So anxiety is when we are trying to rehearsal to uh, um, come to a leaving that situation that didn't happen yet. So this is something that if it is in a small degree, that's fine. But if it is something that happens all the time in the long run, what's happening to our body is this thing here, the cascade of release of stress hormone in our body. And the release of this chemical every day in our life will put us in a stressed situation. And in the long run, chronically, we may develop disease, right, in our bodies. And one of the things that happen if this become a habit is that will affect all the system. For example, our immune system will decrease. The lack of sleep will increase because now we are at anxiety, right? So or sometime if you cannot, achieve what we are looking for, we may go from fear, anxiety, and sadness, and sometimes anger, right? Anger also is another emotion that um, accompany fear. So all this is processed by this structure of the brain that we call the limbic system. Okay, so okay, we have talked a lot about size, a little bit about the amygdala. So the amygdala itself, biologically speaking, doesn't know the difference between good and bad, right? The main function of this structure is the protection, is the survive, or to make sure that we are in a safe, that we are safe, a security environment, right? So this is activate pretty much all the time. If you're driving a highway, you'll be like full alert, right? That's why it's always advised that you don't drive for 3 hours because your system of your body. So you need to stop. You need to give a break to really like help your brain rest a little bit, your physiological, your body as well, right? So, um, but what was the triggers that can enhance or create fears? So we have a couple of suggestions here. So the first is uncertainty, right? So I mean, right now, um, based on the survey that we just presented a couple of slides ago, so the uncertainty, for example, in government, you know, could generate fear, you know. Of course, it's up to each one of us to decide how much room you want to give in your brain to this uncertainty, right? We are not saying that it's bad. No, it's just is the fact. The other trigger that can put us in a state of fear is attention, which means like when you are put in the spotlight. For example, right now, for those that are watching this presentation, I'm in the spotlight. So I have some degree of, I wouldn't say fear, but I'm in the high alert mode because I wanna, to do, this presentation a way that become understandable. That the information that we are presented here can bring some kind of like understand to you. So the attention, and this happens especially like when we are in school, when the teacher just point to you over there in the middle of the class, say, hey you, and they ask you a question, so all the classmates will look at you, so you feel that that is a trigger that may create some degree of fear. Another one is change. Another trigger is change. I mean, especially here in the US, like, people like to move, from one state to another state, and new job, change partners sometime. So those changes uh, bring some degree of fear that can be manageable if we don't let fear take over, right? So this is some factors and the struggles. So So all these can be used to make us move forward. But if we get use those situations and become stuck, or use those situations to justify our fears and doesn't do and we don't do anything um, to manage that feeling, that emotion, then can becomes a problem, right? So when we are under this, of course, we may have other triggers, but we don't have time to name all of them. But so this is the main one, the basic one that we all experience at some level, right? So one of the things that we learned is that for us to when we are under this situation, this can lead to us two different state, right? Or to have two, not to four different response that we call the four F's. So, and I'm going to show to you. So the response that we may have is fight, right? As I have mentioned before, depends of the intensity of the fear. We may fight. We may prepare ourselves to confront, right? And sometimes when we say fight here, could be verbally fight, or could be physically fight, right? So the other F here is flee. Is mean like, you run away, you don't want it to face, because is our amygdala identify that as a threat, a very serious threat that will pose our life in risk, right? So and sometimes we do this emotionally, sometimes we don't run physically, but we just check out of any situation that needs to be resolved, right? Especially related to relationship, we kind of ignore. Is a defense mechanism, okay? The other one is freeze. We don't do nothing. We don't run, but we don't fight. We don't know what to do it, basically. And we have find ourselves, we want to say humanity, right? In those situations, some people has, move on from that situation, or they have stayed in that situation for a long time. And the last one, the last F is faint. We may faint, right? Physically, that they used to call that the fake death, right? Faint. That's basically like the four F's, because fight, flee, freeze, and faint. And so we can literally take this literally as physically speaking, or we can just do this emotionally speak, right? We can fight emotionally, right? We can flee, we can run away emotionally, we kind of shut down. We can freeze, we don't do anything, but don't move forward or don't do anything. And we can faint as well, right? So, okay, so now that we have talked a lot about science, let's just go back and revisit a little bit about what the spiritist science bring to us. We learned that we are immortal spirits. Um, that's why I put spirit, mind, and bodies, because we have more than one body, right? So, and one of the things that we need to make very clear here, according to the spirit science, is that the spirit um, evolves, right? We are created simple and ignorant without experiences. And then through different internship in different kingdom, this spiritual principle will evolve to a point that becomes a spirit. And right now, in the human level, we are spirit, immortal spirit, because we have a beginning, but we have no end. The end always is going to be, perfection until we become perfect spirit or pure spirit. But even though after that, we still continue um, evolving, right? So, just for us to revisit, so we are spirit, as we can see here. And as a spirit, we have what we call mental body. So it's a part of the spirit that is responsible to give a to define that person, the spirit, right? And the mental body is the one that is going to construct the other bodies, right? So the mental body where all the information is created, you know. That's why we always say, like, what you have in mind is what you are. So the mental body, through the evolution process from the spiritual principle to the spirit, will pretty much define us as a spirit, and will help to create what we call the spiritual body. In this case, in spiritual, we call the perispirit, and the physical body. There is a intermediate body here that we call etheric double, because it's a body that is responsible to, help in this connection between the spiritual body, the perispirit, and the physical body. And this is pretty much a layer that is very close to our physical body, and it's called etheric double. Is a layer that when we die, so also this layer of our spiritual body will also die. We will also perish, right? This is just for us to visualize that this mental body is very important, because it's the mental body that is the one that controls pretty much all the other bodies. And the question here is like, where is the central control of our lives, right? Because we brought the information about the brain, but so what happened? The brain's gonna die, right? So what we explained here was the mechanism how we process fear. So we saw what science has beautiful unveil or um, um, reveal to us how our body process threat, right? How we survive. But the spirit is immortal, right? The spirit doesn't die. But we know that no matter how much we try not to die, physically speak, we will die, right? Even those that Jesus has healed died, right? So we're gonna die, but we're not gonna die spiritually speaking. We're gonna just have this body, you know, going back to the source. That is, the chemical elements that form this body, right? So based on this information, the central control of our fears, of our emotion, is in the spirit, is in the mind of the spirit that we call the mental body. But Daniel, the question, can we change that? Yes. As we evolved, as we get to know all the mechanisms, the laws that is responsible to control the physical body, we can definitely minimize the fear. Fear is not bad. Okay, fear is good, because what becomes a problem, no, is good because make us be alive. Help us to as a defense mechanism, is a to be in survive mode sometimes. So what become an issue, becomes a problem, is when the fear took over of our life completely, right? So I would like to bring a little bit a I would say a passage, one of the parable of Jesus, because I think it's very, um, if we are to illustrate with the teaching of Jesus, this parable, the parable of the talents, illustrate what sometime we experience, and what the lessons can we take from this parable. And this is the parable of the talents, right? And some um, translation, some depends of the Bible that we have. This is listed as the parable of the bag of gold, right? So the most common name is parable of the talents. So I would like to play a video here. So about the parable of the talent, and then we can come back. It's 3 minutes video. Then we can come back and highlight some important lessons that we can take from that. And the reason for that is that uh, we have all the tools to cope with our fears. You know, not to get rid of, but to manage, right? So let me play the video here for you, and then we can come back. It's 3 minutes only.
For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability. And straightway took his journey. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he that had received 2 talents, he also gained other 2. But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth, and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art an hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast that is thine. His Lord answered, and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gathered where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it to him which hath 10 talents. For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away even that he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Well, so as we see it, we know that all this parable that Jesus has brought to us is very um, clear, because Jesus didn't mention about God, but the question that led to the parable was about the kingdom of heaven, right? So and Jesus always took the opportunity to bring the explanation about this kingdom of heaven to and bring example of the day-to-day life. And he used this parable, the parable of the talents, and about this man, this Lord that has those 3 servants, and went away and gave those talent. Of course, in the other translation, they say bag of gold, right? One has one bag of gold, 3 bag, and 5 bags. And we all ask it, so can we extrapolate this material examples to this emotion that we call fear? Because what is the main highlight of this parable is the one that didn't use their talent, right? He didn't multiply 1 talent that they received. And the question here is like, what is the emotion that he was prevailed for that servant? Was fear, right? He was fear of what? He was fear of the Lord. And this is something interesting because sometimes we have been learning throughout our evolution that we should fear God, the Creator, right? And Jesus came and gave another definition for the Creator, that he's kind of a loving Father, right? But then by listening this parable, we can um, take some highlights from that. So we have 5 lessons that I think would help us to um, live with our fears and try to really observe what we have brought to this life. In this case, we are not talking about bag of gold, but all the skills that we have, right? Each one of us has some degree of talent. We all have talent, but the question is, are we using those talent? Are we really like put this to help in our evolution, to help society? So this is a question that is very personal. You don't need to answer. You don't need to put in the chat. Just ask yourself, what can we work on your talent to not end up as the servant that was not um, able to multiply the talent. So here there is 5. The first one that we learn with this lesson is that this parable teaches that success is the product of our work, right? Success is the product of our work. We see that the two servant that multiplied what the Lord, when he came back, said, "Well done," right? Well done. So, so the Lord, of course, this is a parable, right? So the Lord represented by God here is not going to come to us as a person, but as we multiply our talent, we can have what we call well done, would be the peace of mind, right? That we have. So success is a product of our work. The second lesson that we can extract from this parable is that the parable teaches that God always gives us everything we need to do it, what He has called us to do it, right? For example, um, you may be thinking, oh, okay, the family that I was born was not the one that God should have gave to me because I have so many problems with that family. Well, according to the parable, you are in the right place, right? Because you have all the everything you need to succeed in that situation. Sometimes we may blame others because our reference is always like the survive mode, right? When we are fearful person, we always try to justify and, oh, I didn't reach this point because of that or that situation, and that's fine. We are not here to judge. Each one has their own experience, but the opportunity is for everyone, right? It's like the day has 24 hours, and everyone has the same 24 hours. The way we use our day is up each one of us, right? So the third lesson that we can extract from this parable is that the parable of the talent teaches that we are not all created equal. So this brings to us another perspective, and also can help us to be a charitable person, more charitable to with one another, right? Because the idea that we are not created equal gives to us some insight that, okay, if someone is suffering or say something that they experience, for example, if they say, I'm afraid, I have fear of this, and I don't, and or you don't. So it's kind of like charitable for us to say, okay, they are in different level. Their experience that the person is um, exercise is valid, and that's why we brought the amygdala. That's the part of our brain that doesn't know what is reality, what's real. For that structure, anything could be not real, but is processed in our brain as if it is real. So in that way, we know that we are not all created equal. We have all the same apparatus inside of us, and the way we process that depends of the level of our evolution, right? Or the previous experience that we have faced before. The fourth, the parable teaches that we work for the Lord, means the Creator, right? Not for our own selfish purpose. So, okay, you may say assim, how come then? Well, because everything we do here, um, at some at the end, is to help in the evolution of the universe, right? So, what are you talking about, Daniel? So, even what you do here, one day you're not gonna be able to control anymore because we're not gonna be here. We are always incarnate and discarnate and move on, right? So, but um, at the end, in the long scale, so what we do is to help ourself evolve, but also to help in the creation, right? So, in the other hand, so we are working for, the creator. Another thing that we can also extract from this message is that, and this is the final one, that shows that we'll be held accountable. We're gonna be responsible. Of course, the end of the parable is we we learn that Jesus was very harsh when she said that the Lord was not Jesus. Jesus was saying the character of the Lord, that the Lord, that person will like take even that one talent and you're gonna give to the one that has more talent, that has multiplied by 10, um, um, and he's gonna be thrown in the lower zone basically, and be suffering. So it's a very graphic way to to say that the Lord is gonna do this to you. But we know that this is just a figurative way that Jesus was explaining, uh, that the Creator God is not gonna do this with us, but we can do this with ourselves if we don't use our talent well. So we're gonna be held accountable, and each one of us has somehow, some degree, some talent that we can share, we can use for, um, to help in the progress of humanity, right? So to finalize, I'd like to bring this quote by Frank Roosevelt. He was the president of the U.S. from 1933 to 1945. And this quote became very famous. So you go to the internet, and even when I was in Brazil, I heard about this quote before I moved to the US. When he said in the open, speech of the his presidents, when he said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And why he started his speech with this quote? Because, of course, in 1933, the whole planet was come out from the Great Depression, right? Economic depression. Fear was in high stake, was everywhere. You know, uh, the 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 situation to survive was like, um, was pretty much in every house. And here we have this president that comes and start his speech by saying that. But then I went back to read about what comes next, okay? Because to say like the only thing we have to fear is fear itself doesn't say much, okay? Doesn't I? I don't get it, okay? So in there I get the whole paragraph, and the whole paragraph says like this. So he starts to say, so first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror which paralyze needed effort to convert retreat into advance. And then they continue his speech. So highlight three things over there that is very important for us, and this is going to be our to-do list, right? Well, take-home list. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified. Okay, let's break down these three things that he said in this sentence. That, I put here as tools to face fear, okay? First of all, when he say nameless, I mean, if we don't know what it is, so it's not gonna work anything that we do. So basically, the first thing we need to do is name it. We need to name it. We need to identify if what is that fear that we are having, right? The second one that he mentions, reason. We need to figure out. We need to figure out. We need to do our research. Okay. So if you cannot leave your bed in the morning, if you are very fearful, if you are fear that the government is going to come and take your job, take your house, so you need to sit down and really figure out how if this really makes sense. In another way, you have to decide if this feeling that you are facing is reasonable, right? So you pretty much you have to give a presentation, and you need to ask, okay, I have to give this presentation. Is going to be important for my job, or it's going to be important for my promotion? So we need to figure out ways to make that fear reasonable, because we cannot face fear if we don't understand what it is, right? You cannot face something that we don't know what it is. And when he said unjustified, so then we need to work on that. So what we need to do, ask the question, is this justified? The fear that I'm experiencing now, there is a reason for that? If there is a reason and you cannot work on that, then that's why we need to do some kind of activity. Maybe, yoga, meditation, to help you to cope with that fear. Or you can talk to a friend. You can, start to go back to the church or to the spirit center, working on spirituality. If it is something that even all this thing doesn't resolve, then you need to look for a professional, right? Maybe has some therapy, look for a psychologist, even, look for a physician, a psychiatrist, to help you, you know, um, um, regain control of the fear. So first, name it, decide, make the decision if this is reasonable or not, and justify, why you have these fears. So one of the things that we cannot do it if we have a friend or someone that has experienced this is diminish these feelings, because this feeling is real. But the person need also to do their homework in order to cope, because no one can um, deactivate or activate a amygdala for other, right? I have my own two amygdala here. No matter what someone tell me, I'm the only one, because of that mechanism that the mental body from the spirit control the other bodies, right? So no matter how much someone can come and tell you, just by telling it's not going to work. Medication works, because medication will pretty much, you know, um, diminish the activity of that area, right? So, but it's for short term, right? It's not something that will help you in the long run. So once you do this, just move forward. You will move forward no matter what, because now you regain control of these fears. You know, uh, there is an example once that I heard someone talk, was a spiritist talk in Brazil, about they mentioned about fear, and one of the examples that, imagine that you arrive at home, and then when you open the door, there is a pit bull or a snake in the living room. So what happened to you? You know? So, well, there is two situations. One, if that pit bull is not yours, then you're gonna freak it out. Probably you're gonna run, right? But if it is your pit bull, what's going to happen? Nothing, because you know, right? So it's just to tell you, that's why it's important to name it. You know that that dog or that snake or that pet is not going to be any threat to you, right? But if it's not your dog, then it would be a threat. We are talking about the stimulus here is the same. The stimulus is a dog or it is a snake. But if it is not yours, it's a threat. If it is yours, it's not a threat. So what is the difference if the stimulus is the same? So this can apply to everything, okay? It is a job or it is a presentation, right? If you have sit down, did your homework, studying, you're gonna feel okay. If you're not, then the fear is gonna skyrocket, right? So, and to finalize, if we have to spell fear, F-E-R-R, so there is two ways that we can bring it just for, it's kind of like fun the way that we can look at fear. Could be like, you can define fear like this: forget everything and run, right? Because basically it's one of the mechanisms that we learn over there. Flee, right? Or face everything and rise. So I think that is the main thing that we would like to leave here for you about this topic of fear. We all here have fear. And it's beautiful because it's one of the emotions that help us to defend ourselves, to survive. But when those fears become, chronic, and we cannot function well, then we need to look for help, right? So between this forget everything and run, face everything and rise, the choice is yours. Okay, so you're all free to make choice. So that's what I wanted to bring to you. And sorry about the time. I think we went a little bit over the time here, but Leo, I'll bring you here so we can help with the question and answers.
Thank you, Daniel, for this great presentation. And I'll use Abby's word here. Very interesting topic, right? For our lives nowadays, to really face fear. Right? Don't run. Let's not run. Let's rise. Uh,
Embrace, no?
Embrace.
Let's
That is
embrace
correct.
our
And
fears.
it's really, really important for us to make the wisest choice. Obviously, we acknowledge our needs. We acknowledge our the things that we still haven't learned yet, the things that we still haven't grasped. The lack of understanding of the dog or the pet that is on the living room, as you were using the analogy there. But it's important for us to really talk about this. And thank you for bringing a lot of the components of our physical body and the matter as well, and how how it affects and how it contributes sometimes to make it even worse. So that's a very important topics there, or subtopics in the topic of fear. And I would like to just to kind of show real quick here some of the hellos that we received from Kirsten. Good evening from Irasema, all of those who are following us, Alba, a blessed talk for all of us. And it's important to acknowledge that the presence of each of one of us here in this moment that we are sharing. um, I would like to then start with this question here, Daniel, from Yasko, when she says, interesting that most in the list of fears in 2014 was almost childish or basic human fears, like to speak public. Today, the fears are mostly related to our lifestyle based on power of technology, warfare, corruption of our authorities. Why is that? Digital era, immediate spread of or excess exposure to news?
Yeah, I think all of this, yes, that you have mentioned, I think that is. Remember that when we present the triggers, like attention, like struggle, change, so all those triggers. So I'll put this in the trigger of a change, right? Our societies change every time we have a robust change. Could be individual, but also could be collective, right? So, for example, right now, cyber attack is something that is becoming real, right? Maybe 30 years ago, people was not fearful, like 7 years ago, but right now it's became something that is really affected our life, right? The misuse of power, you know, the way our society is living right now, the polarization of our society is a new time that we experience. So this brings fear, and now those child fear that you have mentioned, like, I wouldn't say public speak as a child fear, but for example, you're afraid of like pets or heights. It's based in rooting our biology, so that we have that, you know since we are born, like, you get a toddler, they don't want to, they be afraid, right, to be to hide. But now this fear is a social fear, yes, because we are changing, our society is changing, and we don't know how to cope with that. We don't have mechanism, we don't have regulation that will help us to feel safe. I think the question is like how safe we are in this environment, the new environment that we are. That's why checks and balance, regulation, those kind of things need to be in place to protect us from one another, right? Because we never know from where the threat will come from, right? So I think that is would be my, um, I don't have the answer, the complete answer, but I think what you already have in your question answers some of your concern.
Great, Daniel. Thank you. And then Abby made a comment. I would just like to bring it over here for us. Very
Yes.
interesting topic on how thoughts really affect these parts of our bodies. So very true, right? To all of
And
us.
I just make a comment on that. That I mean, we all have anxiety at some level. What complicates our life is like is the chronic anxiety, right? Fear as well. What complicates our life is when it become panic. Panic attack is a already like a area of our fear that is like fear is supposed to happen like in very short time, like to survive. Like, we have a peak and then should go back to baseline, and then we should have our life normally. What happens sometimes, there is people that experience this peak and the peak stay for a long time. So our bodies continue releasing those stress hormone, those feeling that for the amygdala of that person, it is a reality, right? And no matter what you say, it seems that the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that is the reason part of our brain, is not able to shut down. Even if people say, "Oh, there is no why you are afraid to get in the elevator," you know, the people that doesn't use elevator because of the panic attack, the claustrophobia environment, or don't go to place that have a lot of people. Where does this come from?
Right. So then moving on to Kirsten, when she says, Nosolar chapter 42, governor's speech, Narcissa says it's humanity's worst enemy, and it undermines our deepest resources of strength. It makes us weaker, and she's referring to fear here. So really
Yes,
interesting.
yes.
Yeah, great comment,
Perfect.
Kirsten,
Yeah.
there.
Thank you.
And then she says, can you talk about how much or how little the amygdala communicates to the prefrontal cortex, PFC? I read somewhere there are more communications that go from the amygdala to the PFC, prefrontal
Prefrontal cortex.
cortex.
Yeah, that's true. And this has to do with our evolution, right? So let us go back in the animal kingdom. The animal, let's get an example. I don't know, a cat or a dog, okay? The prefrontal cortex of a dog is very small. Is they even like it's not like the human, okay? Like just to give like an example. So dogs, animal, they pretty much they have the same mechanism we have. They have um, they extract the limbic system the same way that we have. So the difference that the reason is not there. There is some rudimental intelligence association that is processed more by the limbic system than the prefrontal, because they don't have the prefrontal developed yet. So, but what happened with the evolution in the human level yes, now we have a new structure that comes, that is responsible for reason, for the declarative memory that we have, so we can take control of the other area. So that's why I mentioned that was neurobiology 101. But this is more a little bit advanced. So what happened is the amygdala and the system, all this communicate with all the area in the brain. Okay. So for example, one of the basic instinct that we have is smell. Okay. So when we smell something, they go, of course, go to the thalamus. The thalamus is the one that, okay, I smell, so send to the area of that codify the information, right? And then depends of, but this is not going to go to that area, but also go through the amygdala. The amygdala, if there is something related to that smell, that's experience, you know, that may trigger emotion of fear or pleasant, because the emotion, they can be, we have so many emotion, right? So the basic emotion that we have is like fear, happiness, joy, sadness, and research said that we have about like 27 emotion basic, not basic, but it can be, I mean, we don't know how many emotion we have, right? But I'm just saying like some of those basic emotion that we have. So all these, they communicate among themselves, this area of the brain. So because of the evolution, so what happened? The communication between the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, that's the one that will uh, reason the stimulus. Um, it seems that uh, we have more pathway from the amygdala to the prefrontal, but from the prefrontal cortex back to the amygdala is not much. It's not the same, So what happened is, because we have less information come from the prefrontal cortex to the amygdala, it seems, that's what the research think, that that's why we act more by impulse than, especially with the tremor, because that pathway back to the amygdala, to control the amygdala, to say, hey, wait a minute, everything's fine. We are in a safe place here, right? It's not yet the amount that, so this information is good, but also can be detrimental, because someone may use that to justify, say, oh, this is written in my biology. I cannot change that. I cannot change. And the worst thing that I think we can experience in this life is say, I cannot change. Is we go against the evolutionary process that God put us on. I mean, you say you can. You may say, maybe I don't want to deal this with right now. That's fine. But you have all the tools that can help you to move on. I mean, sometimes we cannot. Yes, that's why we need to, look for help, right? But kissing, yes, I think what you read is true. Yeah. Mhm.
Well, continue with Kirsten here, Daniel. Thank you for your answer. She asks, how can science truly understand fear in females when most experiments are conducted in males? Does Spiritism talk about how females, due to hormones, etc., experience fear differently, more intensely?
Good question. I think I don't know the answer for this question. You're right. A lot of research is done in male, not in female. And the reason for that is that um, there is much more variable in the result because of the hormone, all the other chemical that pertain to the female body. It's not saying that we don't have those chemicals. We have, but not in a different. It's in a different levels. So I think is I mean we are learning. I don't have the answer for that question, kissing, but at the end of the day, we have all. I mean, the structure of our bodies, female and male, has the basically um, tools, that we all have. But the way we are processing information is a little bit different because we are talking about two different bodies that has different components regulating the activity of that body. But one of the things that I would like to bring is that if we get stuck only in the body, we may we may miss the opportunity, the physical body, right? I'm talking about the physical body. We may miss the opportunity to make some progress in this life. What we experience nowadays, our struggles, our vices, things that push us down, and that's beautifully described in the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, has a cause, right? Has a cause, and we all has been advised by the good spirit that if the cause is not in this lifetime, certainly was in a past lifetime, and that's why we brought that quote from Joanna. Some of our fears is um, enhanced because of uh, experience from past lifetime, and those fears, they are stored in our unconscious, in our unconscious mind, part of our mind that is not bring to the awareness, and sometime we may have forget, and we forgot our past lives for a reason, right? But the emotion experience, it seems that it's timeless, right? So, and that's why we experience things sometimes that we don't know why, because there is no cause in this lifetime, right? So it is very complex situation, but I hope that with advancement of science, things can be more clear to us. Until there, we're gonna work with what we have, right? But that's a good point. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel, for the explanation. And this is nice that Paula wrote this here to us, saying, as amygdala doesn't know if the fear is real or not, the prefrontal cortex can be a reality check. So it's like,
I think, and that's happened to some people. Some people may have this communication from the prefrontal cortex to the amygdala more, have more pathway, and the other doesn't have. I mean, it's like, for example, I would say like some people come with the physical body that, I don't know, has more muscle, or has a skill that other doesn't have. Why not? We have people that that has this communication from the prefrontal cortex to the amygdala is not much. So that's why the person is more like act more on the instinct, doesn't filter, right? And is all the time anger. The anger is all the time, and the behavior, the emotion is always at highest. So it's because the prefrontal cortex is not doing the job that is kind of like reason those emotions. If we don't reason the emotion will do their part. That is, what they need to do it, right? To survive. So at the end of the day, when you see aggressive people, when we see people that is because at the end of the day is a mechanism of survival. It's a survive mechanism that is based on fear, and they don't know how to deal with that. And that's why we are invited to to help one another to look at this very, very closely. And we have a lot of mental issues, different levels, right? Because it's rooted on fear, basically.
and then a really interesting quote by Paula here when she says, naturopathic Dr. Gaetanos Morello, first such position at a major North America hospital, strong enough evidence that eliminating sugar and caffeine has positive impacts on anxiety and stress. Well, for sure, right? It's
Yeah,
like
it's
what
possible.
we eat and what we
Here is the
consume.
thing that I would say about what we eat. Everything needs to be balanced, right? So what happened is our society go to the extreme in everything, eating, in everything, and that's really can bring really, like, problems to our physiology, right? So I agree with Paula. I think the excessive, all the added sugar product that we have in the market nowadays, it's not helping. It's not helping. That's why we need to balance that, right?
Yes, Daniel. I want to read a couple of our actually saying in it, Irasema saying really good. Really was good presentation, Daniel. Thank you so much for this. And yes, thank you. But then again, I'm gonna leave you with the last question here by Abby, and then I'll ask you to finalize answering this question, and then take us into our final
Mhm. Prayer.
prayer, so we can bid ourselves farewell. When she says, "What are your thoughts about also?" Excuse me. What are your thoughts also? The Spiritist view that if you've done almost all of the above, could obsessors have anything to do with not letting go of fear?
Yes. Uh, well, first of all, when we talk about obsessor, we need to ask who is this obsessor we're talking about, right? We need to name it. Okay. So let's bring what we brought, like, okay, fear. So, how to cope with fear? We need to name it. Okay. So, when we say obsessor, so according to the spirit science, the spirit teaching, the obsessor is someone that we have some interaction in the past, because the obsessor can be incarnate or discarnate, right? Right? Can be someone that lives here that is incarnate, right? So obsessed is someone that is posed this threatening to us. We feel threatened by him or her, in that situation. So now we need to reason, right? So we name it. So what the relationship we have. Let's just, for the sake of time, let's pretend that the obsessor is incarnate. It's someone from our family, right? Let's put our family here. Someone that at some moment didn't go well, and that person is prosecuting, is threatening us, is really cause a situation. Okay, now we know who is the person. Second, let's reason this relationship. Okay, what it was done that make that person, continue, you know, go after, So if you have the answer, and then the next one is, what should I do to justify this and move forward? That's the third one in that list, right? So at the end of the day, you cannot respond for other people's action, but you have, based on the survive mode, you have the obligation to live well, right? That's what we're all looking for. So each case can be different, but doing those steps is already a big, big step forward. Now, sometimes we say, okay, we did everything, but the person is still prosecuting or go after or be obsessing you or obsessing me. So to tell the truth, I think we didn't do everything, because if this is still happen, there is something that still connects us to that person, right? So is maybe it's a work that is not going to be end in one lifetime, because that spoiled relationship sometime was constructed throughout many other lifetime. Maybe we need one or two or three lifetime with that person that we are calling obsessor now to really come to terms, right? So it's very complex, Abby, but I loved your question, because we all ask this question all the time to ourselves when we feel that our fear is the trigger by someone else, right? And is based on this spoiled relationship that somehow we had with that person, either in this lifetime or past lifetime. So, but we can continue discuss this in another moment, because we are already in our time, right, Leo?
Yes, Daniel. Yes, thank you so much for again the presentation in this moment, all these answers as well, and thank you for the questions, folks. I think it's important for us to make this as interactive as possible. This, as we come to an end here. So thank you for that. And let's. The only thing, as we always like to ask, is to put this into practice. Right? We receive
Mhm.
all this information here. We study. We bring. We present. Daniel has to go through the fear of presenting. Uh, sharing
Um,
information online.
I'm gonna tell you, Leo, that this presentation when I did last night, like when I practice myself, because I have to practice a little bit here, so it's much better than here now, because I didn't have all the attention, right? I was
Right,
just
right.
myself, talk to myself. But then when I know that there is some attention, that there is people that is following and is going to ask a hard question that, we have here. So you feel a little bit all those chemical, going through our blood stream, right? But it's a good feeling because that is the good fear, right? It's
Hmm.
not the one that we don't know why, right?
I think
But thank you.
the way I see it, and when I have to present, is that if I have no fear, something is wrong. you know, maybe I need to study more, because when we are sure and we have that feeling that everything will be perfect, guess what? We better study a little bit more. So that's a good thing. That's a plausible thing, and that's, that keeps us going forward and helping one another, and really, bringing the standards of our lives, a little bit higher than what was yesterday. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Please take us into the final prayer, and we'll see you everyone next. Thank
Mhm.
you.
Thank you, Leo. And let us take this moment and be grateful for our lives, but also to ask for those that are not here with us anymore in the physical body. Send our blessings, our good vibration to them as well. Thank you, dear Lord, for allowing us to revisit this topic. Thank you for our fears that keep us in the check, that we are not destroying ourselves. But at the same time, we ask your blessings and also the strength to cope with those fears that has become chronic in our society. With the guidance, protection, permission, we close this moment of activity here in our center, and so be it.
Thank you, everyone.